Welcome to Home Library. I'm Tess Phillip, and I am reading The Enchanted Hour by Meghan Gurdon. And as I go through, I'm sitting and reflecting and doing a video on each chapter. And right now I'm on chapter 2, where it all began. And this chapter is all about the history of storytelling, which I have to be honest, at first I wasn't really all that excited about reading. Not for anything, but like I'm not particularly and naturally drawn to history. I find I get dates and times and people confused, and I get anxious about not being able to keep things straight and afraid that I'm going to make mistakes. So I will probably make mistakes in this video. However, reading through, I did find that I could connect with a lot of it, and I highlighted and underlined and made notes in the margin, and I'm going to share that with you. But it wasn't until my 8-year-old son has noticed that I'm reading this book, and he started asking me questions about it. And I told him that I was on chapter 2 and it was a history chapter, and he is a massive history lover. He loves hearing about things that have happened in the past and connecting the stories, and he has a brilliant memory for it. And so when I told him I was reading about the history of read alouds and telling stories, he was so fascinated and kept asking me to share more and more and more. And I found that that's where my connection with this chapter really deepened, because it was through his passion to find out more about this timeless tradition that I realized how valuable and important our read aloud time was and is. And it just made this chapter so much more exciting. So here I am. I'm going to share with you. I'm going to go through my book, and I'm going to read aloud a little bit to you, and I'm going to share some of my notes with you. And I really hope that you'll join me on this journey, because I really believe that there's some things in here that are encouraging for all of us, that will inspire us to read aloud more, and connect with our children and with history in ways that we never knew were imaginable. And so I guess this is the beginning of it, right? It's that connection. We connect with this history of storytelling every time we sit down and tell a story to our children. We're drawing upon a story that's not our own creation, and the story travels through us and through our concentration of our faculties, the inflection of our voices, the warmth and presence of our bodies. We reach our listener. And I was like, it's all about connection, right? When we're reading to our kids, like they might not always be snuggled up with us. Mine are definitely not. They run around a lot while I'm reading, but like I can tell that they're engaged and they're listening, because they'll tell me to keep reading, or they'll come and peek over my shoulder to look at the book. Like we connect with our audience and our listeners when we read aloud to them. And it brings us comfort, right? Like we become familiar with voices and tone and intonation and inflection, and reading aloud and hearing these stories and having these stories passed on just becomes a part of who we are. And I thought it was really interesting. She talks a bit about silent reading and how like that independent silent reading is actually like a very new phenomenon. Like that's not what reading was in history, right? In history, it was someone who got up on stage and had memorized this story and would engage and captivate the audience with their actions and gestures and voices and all of the things that they do to capture the attention of the audience to tell a story. This idea of quietly reading a book to myself, that a lot of us do love, is actually fairly new in history, right? Like didn't exist at all until the printing press came into, well, I guess there was handwritten before that, but my son and I were even talking about like if I wanted this book a long time ago before the printing press, I would have had to wait for someone to like hand scribe, like make a copy of it and then give it to me. And we were talking about how like you couldn't have many copies, and you would need to rely on someone storytelling. Amazing. And you know, like it's a unique experience for the reader. And this here, like she's talking about how reading is a very unique experience, right? Like for the person who's reading, we expend energy, right? Because we have to present the text. We our reading, we're using our eyes, we're using our mouths, we're using our brain to process the words, we're using intonation and inflection and cadence and all these things to try and engage the audience. But for the listener that's taking in the story, it's a very relaxing thing. They don't have to use all of that brain and muscle and body power. And so it's a really unique experience, both for the reader who's exerting effort and for the listener who's getting to benefit and enjoy from all the work that the reader is expending. I thought that this was beautiful, right? Like the speaker leaves off your ordinary talk. You stop talking the way you would normally talk when you read a book, right? And the listener recalibrates their attention, and both enter into a relationship older than memory of our race. Like it extends beyond, right? And it's just so exciting, again, that it connects us. It connects us with each other, and it connects us to those like timeless storytelling traditions. And then like just the way that reading has been perceived through the ages, right? Meghan Cox-Gurdon references another book by Abigail Williams. I haven't read this book, but I'm just reading what's referenced here. The book is called The Social Life of Books, and it says people shared their literature in very different ways, reading books together as a sedative, a performance, or an accompaniment to handiwork, in a means of whiling away a journey or a long dark evening. They saw reading as a pick-me-up and a dangerous influence, a source of improvement, a way to stave off boredom, and even as a health-giving substitute for the benefits of a walk in the open air. And I was just like, it's so interesting, right? Like even the debate between, video books, audio books, print books, newspaper, and she goes on to share some like anecdotes of like, let me find it. I think it's like a cigar. Yeah. These men in Cuba who were making cigars, and at first they decided that because it was pretty mundane, I guess, just sitting there and rolling cigars for these men, and most of them were illiterate, so they couldn't read themselves, and so they actually would hire someone to sit and read to them so that they wouldn't get bored rolling cigars all day. But then it got to a point where someone thought like, oh, we need to stop because this actually is dangerous, because they might get ideas and then want to read and then not want to do their job, and so we need to stop reading to them. And just really, really interesting how like what is good and what is not good really ebbs and flows, and it really like there's so many different points in history where these performances or these reading alouds and the information transmitted through text or through storytelling like has very different perspectives of whether it's good or not. And I feel like we're at that all over again, right? Like I don't know if we ever stop assessing whether these things are helpful or hurtful. One thing then she goes on to talk about like how the reader engages and how public readings, whether you're reading to your children or you're reading in a big public space like the people reading to the Cuban cigar workers, or it's in a big stage presentation. She's talking about how like the reader has various tones, and from the passages, and they're cheerful or stern, or and they have gestures, they point, they shudder, they look around, like they have facial expressions, and all of that engages and captivates the audience. But I thought like for us reading at home, the stakes are not so high, right? Like we're reading at home, we read for love, and we don't have to render up that polished, perfect performance, and actually like showing our children that error in reading and like mispronouncing things actually shows them that it's okay for them to do that as well. Again, it all comes down to, I think this chapter really, it's connecting us to history, but it's connecting us to each other and to reading, and the power that reading has to connect us that's really what the point of this chapter was. And I love how she shared about Thomas Edison, where he, when he came across and invented the hand-operated mechanical roller that was able to like record something, and I didn't know this, but apparently he was reciting Old Mother Hubbard and Mary Had a Little Lamb when it actually worked and recorded his voice. And he went on to say, like, had he known that this was going to work, he would have narrated something more impactful. But I thought, like, and she even pointed out, like, how beautiful that it was a child's nursery rhyme that started, you know, the recording history of having recorded text. And like she goes through, like, it wasn't until the mid 70s where audiobooks started to exist, right? And the shift to accepting audiobooks. She's saying that it has only just happened, and I think that it's still happening. I think that we're learning more how to captivate through recorded readings, and it is a good means, but they're also identifying that through MRIs, like it's not the singular most best way to get that across as well. So they're good, they have their place, absolutely, and they're recognized as reading because they most definitely are. But yeah, just the excitement and the history, right, of all of it. I'm just checking to see where I'm at. I want to share all my goodies with you. A lot of we don't have to be perfect. Yes, this is it. So I guess the one challenge with audio recording that she did talk about, and I underlined this because I'm like, yeah, this is so very true. And I'm just going to read it to you because, it's a good point. It says, unlike a live reader, a recording has no idea who is listening. It doesn't know or care what you feel. A recorded story does not spring to life in the moment, in that unpredictable, fugitive commotion of voice, ear, and text. The machine won't stop to ask questions or to raise comparisons or engage you in any way. It will keep playing until the story ends, or you switch it off, or the battery runs down. And I thought, like, yeah, that's it. That's the difference. I think that's the singular difference between audio recording and a live reading with your child, is that the live recording can't interact and engage with your child the way that you can. And I think that it would be the same for a video, like where the books are animated as well. We love them, we watch them, we listen to audiobooks. I am not downplaying any of it. I think that they're all good. And there's a place for all of it. But nothing can compare to you and your child reading together because it connects you, right? It connects you in a way that a machine cannot, right? Because you can spring to life when your child reacts. You do care about how they respond and how they feel reading a text. And you can feel when they feel uncomfortable or when they're excited and when you need to stop and talk about that or make a comparison because, this reminds me of that and it makes me feel like this and I remember that. And it deepens the connection between yourselves, between you and the book, between you and the author. And that connection will go way beyond any battery life. It will go way beyond the closing of the book. It will go way beyond the story ending. And so nothing can compare to that live action. And I think as she gets towards the end of this chapter where it all began, again, it's that connection, but it's that the historical difference is that live connection, right? When storytelling began, it was in person, right? And so the audience could engage with that storyteller. And we want to keep that engagement as much as we possibly can. People... it's all about engagement. And so that is, I believe, that's what I've got for chapter 2. In the end, it was really exciting for me to read about the history. because it just validates that connection and that connecting time that we spend engaged in books with our children. Absolutely loving this book. I can't wait to get on to chapter 3 now that I've recorded chapter 2 for you. I will start reading on the next chapter and come back to you with a video. I do have a Patreon site, patreon.com/TessPhillip. There are a lot of amazing downloadable materials. There are additional videos that are only posted up there. So make sure you head over there, check it out. You can join as a free member or as a supporter. Supporters obviously get exclusive access to certain materials and support. Thanks for checking this out. Remember to like and subscribe. It helps me get these videos out to more and more families to be as encouraging as I possibly can. And yeah, can't wait to see you back for chapter 4. Bye.